And welcome back. All right, so we're finally to the point where I've made some trades and we're just about to start our spring training. In this video, I'll go over the trades that our team made and sort of what our main active roster is going to look like. And in the next video, I'll cover spring training, what we'll do for our spring training roster, how I like to run my spring training. But so right off the bat, let me just get into the trades. We made a lot of trades and our team is very different. I did hint on this in the previous videos, but I did some things that are different than even what I was talking about then. So right off the bat, I'll just go through the trades through this screen because I can sort of read it out a little bit faster. And then I'll go into the actual rosters and show sort of what I've done in relation to these trades. So right off the bat, we completed a trade with the Orioles. We sent Hector Villanueva and Paul Austenmacher, so both pretty decent players, but of course Austenmacher has that selfish trait. And we sent them to, and Jerome Walton as well, to the Orioles for a right field a AAA player, essentially Chito Martinez, left-handed batter, a relief pitcher named Stacey Jones with all right ratings, especially compared to some of the bullpen arms we have. And the main win of this trade, in my opinion, nothing amazing, but still quite nice, is we picked up a starting pitcher, Bob Milacki. And as you can see, his ratings are okay. It's nothing amazing, but when you compare him to some of the other starting pitching talent that we have, this is still a big improvement. You can see OSA likes him a little bit better than my scout, and that might be a little bit more accurate as well, because I think my scouting ratings for Major League is only good. There weren't any very good scouts that I could pick up from the personnel page, so I'm just going to stick with the scout until his contract runs out next year, and then hopefully there'll be somebody better. The one problem with typically with picking up starting pitchers from American League teams is they're terrible at sacrifice bunting. Obviously, somebody who's kind of pursuing sabermetric way of playing, I'm not huge on bunting, but considering I'm a National League GM and manager, the sacrifice bunt is important for your pitchers because at least they can advance a runner where otherwise they tend to strike out or even ground into double plays, which is pretty disastrous. So that is one drawback, but I would much rather have a pitcher who at least has a decent shot of winning a game versus a terrible starter who can bunt well. So that was kind of the trade-off there, and he's a good pickup. I think in my pitching staff, he's my number 3 pitcher. Ideally, he would be more like a 4 or a 5 guy. But considering the enormous problems we have at starting pitching, still it's an improvement. And this is an improvement for our bullpen. This is a guy like in place of somebody like, say, Bob Scanlon or one of those other lesser middle relievers. He can fill in that sense. And Chito Martinez, this is a guy that I'll probably play for a couple of months in my AAA system and then pull him up into my major league team because he's about that age where he's ready to come up and he's wanting to play in the majors. And he is a left-handed bat, which as you'll see later when I go over my actual roster, I decided my best approach for my holes in the outfield were to actually create a platoon for my corner outfilders, and he's a guy where obviously he's a good just a substitution kind of a player, a backup corner outfielder, but he does actually, against right-handed pitchers, he gets a little bit of a boost in his gap and his overall power, and a little bit better of an eye. So this is a guy where I might wind up using him as a sort of a platoon player in the outfield based on how things go with the other outfielders that I picked up. All right, so moving on. Oh, and you can see, like Milacki, the other nice thing about him is his I mean, he didn't have a great year last year, but he's a pitcher I'm hoping will at least sort of pitch like 500. At least he has a chance of winning half the games he pitches, where my other pitchers, that was really unlikely. So, all right. Now, the next trade I made was I sent Sean Dunston to Toronto, and I picked up the right fielder Glenn Allen Hill and Chris Dahmeyer, I believe is how you say his last name. And Glenn Allen Hill, I don't know if later on in OOTP he isn't that great of a player. I know there is a Glenn Allen Hill Jr., which is apparently his son, and some people have negative and positive opinions about him as a player. But Glenn Allen Hill was is a decent outfielder, a younger player too. So this again is sort of like Cheeto Martinez in the previous trade. This is a guy that I'll use as a platoon player, where he'll come in and he'll face only left-handed pitchers. And you can see OSA really likes him, and my head scout, he thinks he's okay. But nice thing about Hill is that, again, with his ratings, you can see against left-handed pitchers, he has a potential to be a guy that, not the best contact, but he does have some good power. He has a good eye. So this is a player where I think it'd be nice to play him against left-handed pitchers when my other platoon outfielders ride the bench. And this is a guy where with him and Martinez, and hopefully because Hill has a little bit of room for growth in his potential, he actually might blossom into a player that could potentially be a starter for us in the intermediate term. Maybe not a star, but definitely if he can sort of raise these, if he could do what his OSA ceiling says, I mean, then he could be our potential starter for the foreseeable future. If not, he's still going to be somebody within the next year or two that I wouldn't mind starting out there. And the good thing about Hill and with Cheeto Martinez, obviously, because Martinez hasn't even come up to the majors yet, but Hill still has a lot of team control left on for him. So we're going to have him and Martinez for a long time as potential backup players, but even Hill might be somebody that could be our day-to-day left fielder in a pinch. It'd be nicer to have a much better bat out there, but still, I thought it was a good Toronto. They picked up all of or not all, but a portion of Dunstan's contract. Most of it. I'll go over my contracts at the very end of all this. And they actually retained some of Glenn Allen Hill's contract. So I believe this deal alone, we came out like $1.3 or $1.4 million ahead, and we got rid of a player we weren't going to use who doesn't really have a spot for us. And we got a potential solid outfield backup, and we did get another starting pitcher. Now this guy, he's not going to be. Maybe I put him in the bullpen. Oh yeah, this is going to be my long reliever, and a guy that could be a spot starter. Obviously, his pitches are not really good enough to be a starter, but he could come in for do some long relief for us, and maybe even start a game or play in a situation where we have a starter who gets injured early on. He does have a nice velocity as well for a ground ball pitcher, but you can see he most likely won't be much for us, but as just the fact that I could get a decent outfielder and then another bullpen arm was a good trade-off and offload a lot of that salary. Now, this was probably one of our biggest deals, and it's easily one of the more expensive ones. We didn't get a whole lot of money off our books this way, but we got some really quality players, in my opinion. We shipped Jose Zamora, who was our backup utility infielder. I kind of wanted to keep him because he was a left-handed bat, and his ratings were his batting wasn't absolutely horrible. If I was going to platoon him, he would have maybe been something okay at the very bottom of our lineup facing a right-handed starter. But his defense wasn't that great, and so I didn't mind passing him on. We traded away Sean Bosky, which I sort of didn't want to do because in my previous saves, he's been okay as far as like a fourth or a fifth spot pitcher. Maybe winning half the games he pitches. But it just sort of worked out that I had to include him. And then maybe the one biggest piece that was the most sort of painful to give up was Jose Vizcaíno, because there is a lot of potential here if he would have improved his contact. This guy could have been playing shortstop for us this season, switch hitter. So I mean, this was a valuable piece. So it's not like San Francisco didn't get some good value in this deal. I threw Bob Scanlon in there because they were willing to take him as part of the package, and he's never really amounted to much for me. And then the big thing was I gave up George Bell and had to retain a fair amount of his contracts. I had to retain most of the contracts for all these guys. And what I got in return, and maybe this doesn't seem like it's a fair swap, but for me it works. I got Kevin Bass, who was a 31-year-old left fielder, switch hitter. Again, like he's sort of along the lines of those platoon outfielders that I showed you. He's not the greatest contact, a little bit above average home run power. If you look at his splits, he does better against left-handed pitchers, but I mean he can be okay against right-handed pitchers. So this is a guy who can play every day, like day to day. I only have him for this season, so this is a potential player that I might deal near the trade deadline. Because I do have the platoon type players, Glenn Allen Hill and Chito Martinez, that can sort of Martinez could come in and bat as a left-handed batter every day, and then Hill could always be that right-handed platoon kind of an option. And as you can see, his offensive numbers the previous season were poor for San Francisco, but he didn't really play consistently. San Francisco was sort of using him as a backup outfielder because they have at this time Keith Mitchell, who I believe in '89 was the National League MVP, a huge bat. So there wasn't really a spot for him in their lineup, and he's very cheap. I mean, when you compare him to Bell or Dawson, I know his ratings are not nearly as good, but if he can even hit along, this kind of a offensive production, be 2 WAR or better, I'll feel it was worth it, and that he was a good acquisition. I will point out sort of what the money went, or how much these guys cost as far as retaining salaries. And another big acquisition in this deal, and this is the main reason I did this deal with San Francisco, was I did pick up Kurt Manwaring, which, as I talked about in previous videos, a really solid defensive catcher, not much for a bat, but he's probably going to be our day-to-day catcher. We do have another guy that will sort of be a backup, and we might be able to use the other guy as our starter and let Manwaring ride the bench, so he hopefully doesn't want too much money when his next arbitration. And then finally, and this was probably our biggest acquisition in all of these trades as far as a quality player goes. We picked up John Burkett. And I mean, it's not like he's the ace of all aces as far as pitchers go. But when you look at what we had as our starting pitching talent, he's a solid piece. And he's definitely, once we get Frank Castillo up into our rotation after a couple months at AAA, this guy is definitely a solid number 2 or 3 pitcher. In an ideal situation, he'd be more like a 3 or 4 guy, but he's still somebody that I'm really happy to have with this team. The fact that he's younger, that he's sort of just going into arbitration, so we're still going to have some good team control of him for until he's in his late 20s, and we might even be able to give him a short extension, like for 2 or 3 years after that. So this is a guy where, like, as our starting lineup, our starting rotation improves, he still has a spot in it, potentially as like a 3 or 4 guy, and maybe Malaki as our number 5 guy if we can get some other really quality arms in the rotation. So this was a really nice deal for us, I think. We didn't quite offload as much of the salaries as I wanted to, but that still doesn't matter because we were way ahead on that Dunston trade, and as you'll see later on, we still picked up some good players for offloading some of our biggest salary issues. And speaking of which, this trade with Minnesota, we dealt Andre Dawson, and we received a whole bunch for Dawson. A lot of these are sort of minor league filler, just organizational filler. But the main thing I was trading for, obviously not an amazing player, but again, this is sort of like a platoon situation in our outfield. This guy doesn't seem like much, but he is a cheap right fielder. In this case is where we'll use him, even though his arm's a little weak. And if you look at his ratings against right-handed pitching, not amazing, but solid enough for what I'm aiming for. This is a guy that can also play first base on the rare occasion that Grace needs to rest, and then we could pull in one of our substitution outfielders to fill his spot. So, not a not an amazing acquisition, obviously, but again, we have him for the year. He's cheap. If he performs well the first half of the season, I'll probably deal him because we always do have Cheeto Martinez who could come in and fulfill this platoon, the spot in the platoon as far as being a left-handed bat that's similar kind of ratings. If you look, his numbers have been okay. Like more or less the last 6 seasons, he's been an average bat, if not a little above average. So I'm hoping that we can get, again, from him and our Kevin Bass, we won't get numbers like we would from George Bell, but we still might get numbers that are similar to what Andre Dawson tends to put up at this stage of his career in these sims, in these saves that I do. So, and the fact that, this guy costs $450,000, and Minnesota was willing to take Dawson's $1.8 million for 3 years onto their books, as well as we did get just some minor league talent, a first baseman. This guy, he's going to play at our AAA. This is more for just having that good center fielder there. Not really a major league talent, but he is a solid defensive center fielder for our AAA team. Paul Sorrento, this guy, there is some potential in this player as a first baseman. When you look at the home run, the contact's not great, but this is a guy that maybe if he develops well, he could come in and actually be a first baseman for us. It's unlikely. He's almost to that point where he's not going to get much more development, but he's at least somebody that we can play and possibly have playing on our AAA team, and could be a call-up if we had a big hole in our lineup that we didn't have any other way of filling. And then Alex Torres, this is a guy that I'm probably going to play at AA level. Elite defensive center fielder. His bat will never really get there, but this is a guy that if push comes to shove down the line, he could be sort of like a fifth outfielder where he's just a huge defensive asset for us, an excellent pinch runner. So I felt like this trade was probably where we got a huge amount of value as far as offloading that horrible contract from an aging superstar, and we picked up some decent young players that they have some kind of role player type roles that they can fill for us, and we did get a player that he's not going to replace Dawson, but platooning, he might come close. We might be pleasantly surprised, and the main thing is he's so cheap. And him and Kevin Bass, let me see if I can pull that up again. Which one was it? Yeah, this one. like for instance Bass, and I hope his name's Bass and not Bass, wouldn't make sense of it, but anyways, he doesn't want much for an extension. So if I really wanted to, I doubt it, but if I wanted to, I mean, I could extend him for a couple more years, and keep him until he's about 34 years old, which I'm not thrilled about doing, but maybe I could just extend him for a season and pay him a little bit more. I doubt I would, but still, it's an option. And where is it? Bush wants a fair amount more, so this is not something I'm going to do. Yeah, like too expensive for an even older player, but still with Dawson offloading him. Still think it was a good trade because we did get some good defensive outfielders and first baseman who might develop into something, and then just a first baseman who I just sort of threw this guy in because I mean they would let me put him to the deal, and why not just to have a little bit of a filler in the minor leagues. All right, so this trade, Mike Biletke is again one of those pitchers that I'm lucky if they pitch 500 for me. He actually makes more than the league minimum too, and he's an older player that I don't bother keeping after the year. So the fact that I was able to trade him and also get Seattle to retain some of Henry Cotto's contract. I picked this guy up, and then after going through some more trades, I wound up trading him again. So it's not real important that I talk about him. But this was a guy I was thinking, I can use him as part of the platoon. He can be my right field option against left-handed starters. He was relatively cheap, and the problem though is he's a ground ball hitter, and his bat isn't nearly as good. But still, with somebody I was like, well, I could get rid of Bilecki and get something for him, and also save a little bit of money. And Bilecki's not really a player that I care about, so. Once I did that later on, I wound up finding a way to trade him and get a different player that I could use. All right, so this is probably this might be a mistake, but I put this guy on my short list to see. This was that rookie ball level prospect, one of our only shining lights in an otherwise dim pool of prospects at the very lowest levels of our minor leagues. He was a guy where he was not going to amount to a whole lot in the outfield. I mean, maybe he could be a passable right fielder or left fielder. He did have some really nice potential for his bat. I mean, it's rough if this guy winds up panning out and he just is a guy that crushes the ball because we gave him up and what we got for him. I don't really know if it's a fair trade-off, but I did want I wanted to pick this shortstop up. Because once I saw this guy when I was looking through different options, I realized, man, this guy with Ray Sanchez, which is our other shortstop that's down in the A level right now, this guy could be our shortstop of the future, and Ray Sanchez could be our second baseman of the future, because obviously this guy just has elite defensive ratings. And he looks like he's going to be an okay hitter that will put the ball in play. I mean, he's not going to be like an amazing offensive player, but with these sort of defensive ratings and the fact that I can sort of, give him a couple years in the minors along with Sanchez, hopefully they sort of they fill these out. He's about ready to come up anyways. I mean, really, I could bring him up if I wanted to. But I'm inclined to let him just to play a little bit at AA and then AAA next year. Sanchez will be on a little bit slower of a schedule possibly because his bat's not quite as there yet. But yeah, this guy, when I saw that he's more or less ready to be at the major league level, at least as far as his ratings show. And he's got a good work ethic. He's a good leader. I was just like, this guy, I want this guy. And so I was willing to see, what I could give up to get him. And once this piece, sort of this Skylar Wehadge, became part of the equation, then I just looked at what other players I could grab. One of those being Gil Reyes, who's not a good bat as far as catcher goes. He's getting a little bit older. But he is a solid defensive backup, and so this is going to be my backup catcher at the major league level for now, while I give Rick Wilkins a little bit more time in the minors, and that I sort of hang on to this guy, and he's going to be cheap. I mean, his arbitration estimate is essentially the lowest estimate you can have for arbitration. So, and he won't really exceed that because he's going to be a bench catcher generally. So, and he's not going to put up big numbers. So, it was good to have. He's not an elite defensive catcher, but he's a guy that if he comes in, if Manwaring needs a rest, he's still going to be okay. We picked up this right-handed pitcher, this bullpen arm, just to sort of fill in our minor leagues with a little bit better bullpen options. Nothing great here, but this is a guy that, as time goes on, it's nice to have decent pitchers in your minor leagues so that your minor league system, their teams can be winning. And because part of your player development in the minor leagues is if your teams are losing really poorly and the team chemistry just goes to crap, it actually hurts your player development a little bit. And so having teams that can win at the minor league level, it is useful for the development of your really good prospects. And so sometimes you want to have just good organizational filler. This is a starter. And he wants to play in the majors. I don't really see a spot for him with these kind of ratings. But still somebody that I can use in the minors, and potentially I could call him up as like a long reliever if I was really desperate. Now, so I picked up this really good shortstop prospect, and Angel Gracia, yeah. Second baseman, just sort of a guy I could throw in. Again, like nothing amazing for the bat. His defense isn't just knocks you out of your seat, but it is really solid for a second baseman. He's got some good speed, so this is just a guy that he's going to be a minor leaguer most likely, but he's not a ground ball hitter, so you never know. Maybe he does have a high work ethic and high intelligence. So sometimes guys like this can exceed what they're expected to do. So we'll see, but I don't expect much from that. It's just a guy that was thrown in there. And then Ruben Rodriguez, another center fielder. I always try to pick up a lot of good defensive players in these sort of trades because they're normally cheap, and having really good defense at all your different levels, your minor league levels, it also helps your teams win and your pitchers develop. So this guy's just sort of a solid all-around outfielder. He'll be fine for center fielder. As you can see, his bat's not really much, but again, just somebody that I could put into the deal. So this was an expensive trade as far as giving up kind of one of our few really good, really young players. Or hopefully they'll turn into a really good player. But this shortstop prospect was too good to pass up when I saw these defensive ratings, and the fact that he's already, you can see like he can play anywhere in the infield. It's surprising that the AI has actually played him, or he's picked up some first base as well already. He's only 5'10", so it really doesn't make sense to use him there. But obviously he can play any of the infield spots. And then if you look, his outfield ratings are solid as well. He could even play center field, but he could definitely play the corners. And with this kind of an arm, I mean, this guy could be a right fielder even. And obviously his bat isn't going to justify that. But so a super versatile player. Nice personality traits. You don't know the personality class yet, but it's probably something good, considering he has high leader and high work ethic. So I felt like this was worth giving up a slightly younger, potentially a a higher ceiling prospect. Maybe I'll regret that later. I did shortlist this guy, and we'll see how he does over time. Next trade was this was me sort of doing a little house cleaning, getting rid of some pieces that I wasn't going to need anymore, and getting whatever I could for them. I shipped Danny Jackson to the Texas Rangers, and I picked up a minor league shortstop. Victor Gomez, and you can see like no bat at all, but this is a guy I just decided to, considering his age and he's already got a little bit of minor or major league service, I just threw him up into my major league team. He's going to be on my active roster, but this is sort of my backup utility infielder. He can play a little bit of outfield as well. You can see like his outfield ratings are solid, so probably in spring training I will I'll look to improve maybe his play him at left field or something, just so that I have this guy as somebody who can fill into almost any position. Not really anything special though. And then there's Danny Gloyd, and my minor league system is really lacking good catchers with good defensive skills. So this guy's got a poor catcher arm. But with this catcher ability, I mean, he's going to be a great guy to play at those probably at single A and double A levels for the time being. His bat will improve a little bit, so he can probably even eventually move up into triple A. That catcher arm's rough, but still, it's always nice to have catchers who have these kind of elite catcher ability ratings. And so I was happy to throw him into that deal. Jeff Rice, again, like a really solid outfielder with just a cannon for an arm. Decent bat ratings. I mean, the power is nice. The contact, the ceiling's really not high enough, but still, this is a guy where, give him a little bit more growth, and the fact that he's already sort of the age where he could be coming up to into the majors. This is a guy where, I mean, he could be a potential backup outfielder. Not somebody I'd be thrilled about having as a backup outfielder, but still, this was, I thought, like good. I'm giving up Danny Jackson, who's like a dead end pitcher that I can never get anything useful out of. He's 29. He's gonna, I believe he's a free agent after this year, so it's like I wouldn't want to sign him. So I'm getting, I feel like, a lot of young players. Some of these guys, and a lot of these guys in these trades, they might be Rule 5 guys, but I think I have 27 guys on my 40-man roster right now. So when it comes to time for the Rule 5 draft, I can pick, the ones I really want to protect. Considering I'm in a rebuilding mode right now, I don't put a whole bunch of guys on my 40-man until I get to that Rule 5 draft, and I sort of really decide who I want to keep. And a lot of times I've traded away some of my other main active roster players by that point. And so I have tons of room on my 40-man. But another acquisition was Fernando Jimenez. This is just a bullpen arm, kind of a long reliever at best, but he's a little bit older. But hey, I could throw him into the deal, so I did. It never hurts to have some kind of extra relief pitching, organizational filler for your minor leagues, even if he winds up being a guy that gets cut or whatever. And finally, Jacinto Velosa. This was a left-handed pitcher, a starter. Again, probably not going to amount to much. Not really major league level, or even though he wants to play the majors. But this is a guy I can pitch in my AAA system or league, and he's better than some of the other guys I have there, most likely. So just a guy. These are just guys to sort of give those minor league teams a little bit better of a chance. Finally, moving on, our trade with the Brewers. We who did we send for? Oh, Chico Walker, who was sort of our backup utility outfielder, could play a little bit of infield, good speed, decent bat, but in my experience, he doesn't really bat very well. For him, I got just a whole bunch of minor league pieces, and then I did get a major league player that they retained some of his contract. This is a reliever, Julio Machado, which I believe there's a current major league player named similar or the same, maybe his son. And when I saw him, I was like, man. The movement's not great, the control's poor, but look at this stuff and his fastball and curveball. So this is a guy I was like, I'll take a chance on him and pick him up, and I'll throw him in my major league bullpen. Not really use him in important situations, but if he can improve his movement and his control just a bit, I mean, this might be a guy that I have a place for. You can see in the little bit of time he spent at the majors. I mean, he did pitch in the previous year. He pitched what was that, 47 innings when you when you total between the Mets and the Brewers. And for the Mets, he was an ERA plus of 120. His FIP wasn't great, but partially it's because he's probably walking a lot of guys. And then for the Brewers and the little bit of work he did for them, the 13 innings, I mean, he was just a monster. If you look, the percentage of walks, it's high, but this could be a guy in this current save in this time period. There's a reliever named Mitch Williams, who was a pretty big closer for the Philadelphia Phillies, and he was known. He did pitch for the Cubs as well. He was called the Wild Thing because he had just really nasty stuff, but he was prone to walking guys, hitting guys, just being a. I think that the baseball comedy Major League. Ricky Vaughn, the whole Wild Thing stuff is sort of a little bit of a play on Mitch Williams. Anyways, so this is a guy, when I saw this, I was like, this isn't bad, especially giving up Chico Walker for something that might develop into a decent pitcher, maybe even a something elite. But this is just another catcher that had decent catcher ability, nothing special. His catcher arm is pretty terrible, but somebody that I could have as like a backup catcher at AAA level, and not have to worry that his catcher ability was terrible if he had to come in to relieve the main catcher. Left fielder, Moises Ocampo, nothing really special here. Doesn't hit for power, poor eye and discipline. But he is a spark plug, so kind of just pick this guy up as he can be sort of a backup, and he can help the team chemistry a little bit in whatever minor league level I play him at. Alex Rodriguez, again, just a guy I could throw in, first baseman. Nothing really special here. This is more of just a backup first baseman, if that, kind of a throwaway player. And then Elijah Charter. We can't. Oh, there it goes. Just a bullpen arm. Somebody that can throw some long relief in my AAA team or AA, depending if his age will let him be there. So nothing really amazing, but I was giving up a player that doesn't amount to much. And the one piece that I got that maybe can amount to something is this Julio Machado. Almost finishing up here. So ultimately, that trade that I did with Seattle for Henry Cotto, as I was looking and realizing with my roster that I still had a spot where my shortstop was a little bit suspect. I have a right-hander that has really good defensive ratings and sort of a below-average bat. But I was like, man, I would really like to platoon my shortstop if I can. And I gave up a left-handed shortstop, Jose Zamora, who was, I'm not a great fielder, but I was like, man, it's too bad I did that. But then as I was looking through different players, I had noticed him earlier and kind of forgot about him. But this guy from the Detroit Tigers, Isaiah Reynolds, Again, not an amazing bat, but if I'm going to platoon him, he's about, he's about what the right-hander would be. The right-hander's actually a little bit poorer against right-handed pitching. So I was like, man, I could use this guy as my main shortstop against right-handed starters. Great defensive skills. He's going to hit poorly, but he's going to be at the bottom of my lineup anyways. My lineup's going to be garbage anyways. And I was like, I'm going to get this guy and get rid of Cotto and his contract, and I had to retain just a little bit of it. It wasn't much. And Detroit actually retained a little bit of Reynolds' contract. So I felt like, I have that Cheeto Martinez, who I can bring up from the minors a couple months into the season if I want. I don't need Cotto. I have Glenn Allen Hill as a right-hander, and Bass can hit switch, so I don't really have to platoon him if I didn't want to. So I decided that's what I was going to do. I shipped off Cotto and kept and acquired Reynolds, and he's going to be in my active roster now. And finally, I sent this was me getting rid of a toxic piece. A guy that is unmotivated. I sent a nothing third baseman to get more or less a nothing bullpen arm. A guy that maybe I use in I'll probably use him as a I might throw him down in AAA actually. Anyways, so those are the trades that I made, and just to sort of give a little sense of how that helped us or hurt us as far as money goes. You can see with George Bell, we had to retain a little over half of his contract, which hurt. I mean, but if you remember back to that trade, we did get quite a lot from it. Randy Bush, they retained almost all of his $450,000, so we only are paying about half of his contract, and that's hardly anything. Like that's very, very little to pay. Henry Cotto, we're just retaining $134,000 of his like $550,000, so nothing terrible there. And Jose Zamora, we had to retain his full league minimum. Bosky, we almost had to retain his full league minimum. Dunston, we only retained 5%. So we offloaded almost his full $1.5 million for the players we got for him, which was a huge win. Vizcaíno, we did retain about 2/3, and Scanlon 2/3, and then Stacey Jones, we retained some of that. Wait, no, that's he's on us. We got him. I'm sorry. They retained almost his full contract, and we're just on the hook for a little bit. Now, the thing with Vizcaíno, he was going to start getting expensive after a couple seasons when his arbitration kicked in. So I don't mind ever retaining contracts for guys, because we essentially have their money on our books anyways. And when you think about this, so we had to retain some of this money, and when you add it up, I mean, it's probably like close to 1.5, 1.6, maybe 1.7 million total. But that was Andre Dawson's 1 year of his contract, and we freed up 2 more years of his contracts. And that doesn't even mention that Dunston's 1.5. So essentially, we came ahead out of all this. When you look at like things over a period of 2 or 3 years, like we're coming out ahead of this like $3 million. And we did pick up a lot of good young players for our minor league system. We got some starting pitching that's going to help a little bit more in the long term than right now, because we're just not going to have the offense to really do much with it. But all in all, I think it was a good play. And if you look, let me go here. So our payroll went from, I think it was like 15th, if I remember correctly. Now we're almost at the bottom of the league as far as our payroll. So we really cut things to the bone as far as, and you can see like now we just have an enormous pool of money. We're going to use some of this extension. I did put in a lot of deals for extensions. But I mean, when this is all said and done, we're going to have a lot of money for free agency. And hopefully we'll be able to pick up some good young players that don't cost us any of our draft picks. And and one mistake before I go on to the roster real quick. One mistake that I made when I advanced up to, I was doing my daily 5 shops, and I kept advancing, and I didn't realize I advanced right up to the spring training, start of spring training, is I forgot to adjust the sliders on my scouting. So I might, if I can do it, activate commissioner mode and come and fix these, just because that was an oversight. And there's no way I want to put this much money into scouting the major leagues. I personally don't believe you really need to, because OSA's information on a lot of major league players is already pretty solid, I think, because they're already kind of like known quantities. And I definitely want more money into my amateur scouting for when the draft comes up, a decent amount of minor league, and a good chunk in international, because we're going to be acquiring some international players as well. So that was a mistake. But anyways, on to our actual roster. So because we platoon, I'll go over right versus right-handed pitching and left-handed pitching. Now, against our right-handed pitching, we'll have Mark Grace as our first baseman. Still a guy that I'm kind of, maybe I should trade him and then use Randy Bush as my first baseman. But we'll probably hang on to Mark Grace anyway. So we have Mark Grace leading it off. Ryan Sandberg as our number 2 hitter. Luis Salazar, our older third baseman, will be our number 3 hitter. Kevin Bass will be our cleanup hitter. Randy Bush will be our number 5 spot. And then, I did forget, this was a guy I mentioned in my other videos. He's a center fielder from my AAA team. I brought him up. This is going to be our starting center fielder. And not much with the bat. He's got decent speed, but an elite defender. So I wasn't able to, the one thing that I regretted in all this is I wanted to find another player like this that had about the same level of bat and same defensive skills that could platoon center field, so that we had like this guy come in against left-handed starters and then the other guy coming against right-handed starters, but it wasn't meant to be. And this offense is not going to be great anyway, so I don't really care. We'll have Reynolds as our shortstop, and Manwaring as our everyday catcher, both against right and left-handed pitchers. Our depth chart, you can see it here. The main thing is Glenn Allen Hill. For the time being, he's going to be our guy that steps in if any of our starters are tired. He's not really suitable as a center field backup, but we can use him in a pinch. And I brought up Doug DeCenzo, not really because he's anything special. He can be sort of useful to use as a pinch hitter, because he is a switch hitter, even though he's a ground ball hitter, and he can be a pinch runner. But the main reason I brought him up is for team chemistry. I didn't have any pranksters on the team, and for the time being, I'll bring him up, and then when Frank Castillo, the pitcher that I'm going to pitch in AAA for a couple months, when he comes up, he's a prankster, so I'll move DeCenzo back down, and that's probably when I'll bring that Cheeto Martinez up. And we'll have a Calderon as our backup shortstop. Isaiah Reynolds as a backup third baseman, because he can actually play. He has some third base rating as well. Calderon as our second base backup. I'm going to develop Sandberg as a first base backup in the spring training this year, and if he's good enough, I'll sort of leave this like this, to where if Grace ever needs a rest, Sandberg will shift over there, and then Calderon will play second. Reyes obviously at catcher. You can see the pinch hitters and pinch runners. I manage all the games and do all the substitutions, so the AI never has to do this stuff, but I still set it up just so it's kind of in my mind. I do have it in mind too, where if I get into late game situations where we actually have a lead, which will be rare, but it does happen, I have certain players that can come in as defensive subs, and that's just kind of remind me that, oh yeah, like take Salazar out, and it's supposed to be under third base. Take Salazar out and bring Gomez in for third, and have Hill play for Bass in left field. All right, and against left-handed pitchers, I didn't do the depth chart yet. Not a whole lot of difference. I got Grace, Sandberg, and Salazar leading it off. Bass still in the cleanup spot. Glenn Allen Hill will be playing as the fifth batter instead of Kevin, or not Kevin Bass. What was the guy? Randy Bush. Again, same center fielder, Duhan. In this case, Calderon will be starting as shortstop, and Isaiah Reynolds will be riding the bench. And again, Manwaring is our catcher. So that is going to be our actual starting lineup, and it's going to be rough. We are definitely going to miss George Bell's bat from most of the saves I do. He is a good production source of runs and home runs and that sort of thing. Salazar, he's not ideal to be batting in that third spot because he hits ground ball. He's a ground ball hitter, and he does, even though he has a void K55, he tends to strike out a fair amount too. But this is sort of the way I'm going to roll with it and see how we do. Spring training, I do some crazy stuff as far as how I do my lineup. So I did want to show this depth chart now, because what I do is a lot of these, I sub them out every second game. And I also set my batting orders based on the number based on the number of at-bats each player has been getting in the spring, and I also do my pitching a certain way. So I'm going to talk about that in the next video. Sorry this was a little bit longer than I intended, well, a lot longer than I intended, but going over those trades took longer than I realized. And anyways, see you later for the actual spring training roster and explanation of how I sort of run that. And then after that, I'll probably actually play a single spring training game just to sort of show how I do that process. Anyways, thanks so much. If you like this video, please throw a like on it, consider subscribing and ringing the bell. If you have any feedback, I really appreciate comments. I'm sort of doing this just to pass the time, but it is nice if there's a little bit of give and take between people. If people write something, I'm happy to respond to it. Obviously, I'm doing this have a little bit of a feeling that I'm doing something social when I'm playing this game, even though I'm essentially just sitting in a room talking to myself when I'm looking at all this. So it feels a little bit weird, but if I actually get a couple of subscribers and people liking videos and throwing comments down, I will feel like I'm not just sort of in a room talking about a fake baseball team from 30 years ago, playing a game and talking into a microphone to nobody. Anyways, thanks so much. Have a good one and take care.